Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Cutting Through the Bullshit. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie Snyder, and I am a high performance mentor. Through my unique blend of strategy, mindset, and intuition, I help men and women to cut through the BS in order to create the life and business they desire. So, the other day I guess I was on Instagram. Sometimes I get caught doom scrolling, just full disclosure. And there was someone who was talking about where our memories are stored. Also, just to let you know, this is going to be a contemplation episode, just because I like to talk out loud. I like to verbally process things, so we're just going to go with this. So someone was talking about where memories get stored, and she referenced to it as like a cloud. So similar to the cloud storage on our phone, where it goes into this cloud and saves there. She suggested that that is also what happens to our memories. And I thought it was really interesting because we technically don't know. Because by the time someone gets the chance to poke around in a brain, it's usually dead. Unless they're doing something that's really unethical. We won't even go there. But I started to think about it a little bit more because I know that there's conversations that I've had where you have to change your frequency, right? We hear frequency energy quite a lot now. And when people try to describe frequency, they talk about it like you're tuning a radio, where now you don't have necessarily the little dials where you would tune a radio, but back in the day, you would have to tune the radio with some dials, and sometimes it would be really staticky, and then it would start to get clear, and then you would have to adjust the antennas and all these things, right? And so the frequency is really very similar to tuning a radio. And so there's some stations where it's like you're tuned into all the negative nonsense and you're beating yourself up and spiraling. And then you can start to tune your frequency differently where you get all of the great information, right? All of the incredible downloads, all the other things. And this idea that our memories are stored in a cloud was quite appealing to me because there are, I guess we'll just call them synchronicities that happen that I've noticed, where I think the first one that I was fairly aware of was back in 2019. I remember being in the bathtub. I had a bubble bath, and I received kind of the download of a trifecta of three parts: your mind, your body, and your soul. And correlating that to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in biblical terms. And I remember getting that download and being told, like, this is the through way. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I wonder, like, let me see if I can pull on that thread. Well, at the same time not the same exact time, but very similar timing, was when one of my mentors started to talk about these three different kind of bodies within yourself, where she calls them the boss, the goddess, and the badass, right? Those are the three things that she uses. And that was really kind of a paramount study for me to begin to see how I was working with myself or fighting myself, essentially. And I really like to use the correlation or the analogy of, imagine you're on a chariot and there's three horses pulling you. You're going to go much farther, much faster, much easier if all of those horses are pulling in the same direction and they have the same goal in mind, right? So this would be your mind, body, and your soul. When you are in alignment, those three horses are headed in the same direction together in unison, and you're moving quite quickly. Now, when you're out of alignment, the visual that I use is these three horses all have their own agenda. They're all running in separate directions, and it literally rips your chariot apart to pieces, right? Because horses pulling against themselves are just going to break the thing that they're pulling against. But when you can get all three of them to work together, that's when things really start to get beautiful. And so I remember that being one of the first synchronicities that I recall, kind of like in a greater space of things where I had no direct connection to this person. She was someone that I followed on Facebook, on social media, but we had never had a conversation before. And so it was interesting to me kind of that how those downloads happened almost at the same time we received that information. And so this whole idea that our memories are stored in a cloud feels very true to me because, one, again, we don't know where they're actually going. And I do believe that there is divine wisdom that we all have access to that we just, I don't even know how we just tune into. That's the easiest way to say it. Because there have been other times where there's been similar ideas that have floated through and I've seen on social media, or, that whole thing where it's like, oh, I was just talking about you. And then you call, like my mother, she's like, oh, were your ears ringing? Because I was just talking about you. And I call her. And so I do believe that there is a greater interconnection between everybody. And to have memories in a cloud would make a whole lot of sense. Which also makes me think, when we go into a dream state, what happens there? Because some of the dreams that I have are really quite vivid, and I can come back with very specific details, with names, with dates, with times. It's actually quite interesting when I'm in kind of one of those, what's the word I want? Lucid dreams, right? Where everything seems very, very real. And I remember in 2020, when the world was being chaotic, my lucid dreaming had increased substantially, to the point where I was actually not getting restful sleep because the lucid dreaming was so prevalent. And that was really quite frustrating to me, I'm not gonna lie. But as an empath and as somebody who is quite spiritually connected, some of these different energies tend to impact me greater than others. And so it's really just kind of interesting to think in terms of, or to contemplate, right? We think about a lot of things all day long, but to contemplate the idea of our memories being stored in a cloud, which would then really give relevance to tuning into different frequencies and simply kind of changing the station that you listen to, so to say, right? It's just all very interesting. And then there's the question of why. Like, why would we benefit from it? I mean, the most immediate response that comes through there is the benefit is that we are all divinely connected, which allows us to be more gracious and understanding to others, right? Because we're all divine beings here on earth, right? We were all created in God's image. And so while there are the differences, it's, this beautiful puzzle piece kind of a thing. Maybe I'm going off on some rabbit trails. It's fine. This is a contemplation episode. So I really just, there's nothing necessarily to do. You don't have to think about anything per se. I have just noticed that in this stage of motherhood and of business building, I have created so much efficiency that I do have more time to my day to actually contemplate these things. And so these things come up and I just kind of sit with them and discuss them amongst myself, right? Or myselves, because sometimes I do bring in other people energetically to have this discussion with. One of my coaches, Ryan Ukomi, he laughs at this conversation all the time when I talk about bringing people in. And I'll have lucid dreams where I will sit down with some of these people that I follow on YouTube or social media that I consider my mentors, and I'll have coaching sessions with them at night. And that's really quite fun too. I come up with some very interesting things. Another one that just popped up was I was recently in this 21-day challenge. I forgot his last name. Oh, John Hillstead. And I follow him on Instagram. And I was a little bit behind, but I was like a day or two behind. But I remember waking up and having a very specific thought in regards to receiving money. And that day when I was listening to one of his voice messages, he talked about the same exact concept. Um, and so that was just really interesting as well, because it's intertwined where you're getting the information ahead of time, in some instances. Not necessarily psychic, although some instances could be, but it's also interesting to me. It's not really explainable, because people will tell you that you're cray cray. Um, but I just love different perspectives, because again, it's so interesting to me that that is the perspective that came through for that person, right? So if we're all sitting there reading the same book, or having, watching the same movie or whatever it is, we all have very different ways that it hits us. And I just find that fascinating. Totally fascinating. So, all right, I'm gonna wrap up here. I'm getting back to some other creative stuff that I'm working on right now. I'm very excited about all the things coming through, so I will keep you posted as they come through. But I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, be you, because the world needs more of you. Bye.